Out here for this session, we're going to be reviewing hardware and network troubleshooting overall to review the common hardware and network issues that may arise. As we stated before, most of the steps are going to be the same. The only variance is in reference to computers versus networks is in the steps of troubleshooting. The least intrusive when it comes to networking is from the outside in, and then usually in that means like from the physical layer, towards the application layer, and then when it comes to actual computers, you go from the application all the way up to the physical layer. By the end of this session, we should hopefully be able to identify the common hardware and network issues that users experience, describe how to resolve these common issues. Troubleshooting is difficult, even for experienced technicians. You can improve it the more you practice and the experience that you have, because basically, as they say, a wise man is not very smart. He's just wise because he is able to learn from his errors and ways, and he's willing to be able to practice to get this type of experience. Issues may require troubleshooting in the common either storage, video systems, your printers, wired or wireless networks. We need to understand that we have to be persistent at all times and be able to adapt. And the reason why we need to be persistent is that even though ourselves are not able to resolve this issue, another common thing that we like to say is not what you know, but who you know that can help you to be able to resolve the issue. No one, as I said, no one in the IT field knows everything. It's impossible, especially nowadays with all this realms of security, cybersecurity. You have networking people, telecommunications people, you have server specialists, you have all plethora of different ways you can go into this realm, including management. Within it itself, computers are complicated. They're not an easy thing, especially when you first start off. You need to understand and give yourself some time for troubleshooting, and don't always gold plate in reference to time. Can't just give them a scenario that you think when you're not sure what the issue is, never give them a scenario where they're going to get everything back right away. Prepare for yourself, obviously. Usually your co-workers or the internet, as I said, are able to help you with when it comes to those difficult situations, especially when you get frustrated. Sometimes, we like to say, a picture is one of the things that is very helpful for you when you're taking apart some of these devices or working with these devices. And at the same time, the more you work with the device, the more experience you have, obviously the better you get and the more effective troubleshooter you become. Even if it becomes a brand new issue, you can always rely on what you've done in these other complex areas to be able to rely on those type of steps and scenarios, what you did, who you reached out to when it came to being routers, who did you go to when it was a problem with the server. Those are people that you need to be able to get in your mind, especially when you're in these specific situations, to be able to rely to. Any questions, doubts? Right. As we said, common issues is going to be storage, video systems, be projectors or your actual external displays, or on the laptops or on the phones, printers, and wired or wireless. As for your hard disk system, obviously nowadays it's either SATA or PATA interface. It can go bad. It may just be as simple as trying to replace it, and or it may be that it's actually not in. Maybe somebody was moving the actual device and or was doing some type of maintenance. The disk itself may be going bad or failing. Usually there's software that's available for you inside the operating system to check them. As from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Apple users, I know Linux for sure, you do not have to defrag. It doesn't matter if you have a hard drive or an SSD. But is Apple the same way? I know it's built off of Linux.
Yeah, I don't
Apple's
think
the same
so.
way,
I've
right?
never seen
You don't need
that.
to
I've never
defrag.
done it.
That I'm
You
aware
never
is based on it. You don't have to touch it,
no.
which
Well,
is
it's the way programs are loaded as well onto the system. You don't need to defrag it.
all right,
It has to
cool.
do with
I just want.
the kernel and everything. I think. Yeah.
All right. So anyway, so in reference to this is mostly the actual defragmentation will be in Windows itself, since I guess they can't seem to figure it out. You could also check the adapter itself. It can be going bad. Maybe you might just want to replace the actual adapter. Some of these things, as I said, if they're high end ones, is as simple as taking it off the power adapter from the back and then just swapping out the cables. The first and last causes are easy to identify because obviously uh, it's a physical nature. But when the disk is going bad or failing, sometimes that can be very difficult if we can't obviously pinpoint the problem, if it is a physical disk or is it maybe the cabling itself. Sometimes it can be even the BIOS itself, but that's very rare where you're having issues where it can't understand. I've seen it on RAID controllers per se, but I haven't really seen it uh, uh, nowadays on many motherboards. This is way back when you had to put the sectors, the cylinders, and heads and tell exactly what type of hard drive you had. So, what are the common ones? Your loud clicking, scratching noises. If you hear that, that's usually a hard drive if it's a regular hard drive. If you hear loud clicking, scratching noises and you have an SSD drive, what can be wrong? You're hearing inside the
The platters.
computer, you're hearing inside the computer a loud clicking noise. Okay, I would take that for a regular hard drive. Definitely the platters or something's wrong in there. But I have an SSD drive and I'm hearing a loud clicking noise from inside the computer.
What about Nicole's response? Fans.
Thank you. I didn't hear her response. And in reference to the slow performance of read or write failures, the basically that's usually when the hard drive itself has issues of being able to read or write, or it may be too full. The solutions could be as simple as removing files themselves and to be able to free up the space or defrag the hard drive. As for booting problems, this could be obviously a plethora of things. As I said, the BIOS is your enemy. If he doesn't have that in his Rolodex or something happens and he's unable to actually recognize the drive, you can have issues. The OS itself can actually be the one that cannot be found. Could be that maybe the boot sector went wrong or something is uh, not correct with the actual boot sector. You could have got could have been even worse, maybe some type of malware. Obviously, we need to confirm is in the physical nature is it that needs to be reseated. Sometimes some of these things do, obviously from heating and expanding, and it can actually get a little bit loose per se. You could just take it out and put it back in. As for the MBR, the master boot record or the boot sector, the hard drive can go bad, and you can obviously fix that depending on the actual version of Windows. There is the bootable media, USB, or optical disk, and you can go into Windows recovery environment to be able to do the fix boot rec fix MBR flag or the boot rec fix boot, depending on what you wanted to do. Any questions on the hard drive? Sorry, did I hit two things? I just hit two things. Smart self monitoring analysis reporting technologies. This is basically a software that monitors the hardware reliability. Therefore, theoretically, it can warn you of an imminent failure. The idea behind Smart is to obviously help you get a preemptive jump on a failure to your actual your computer and back it up. although we should anyways be doing persistently backing up our information. This obviously just makes sure that we avoid any catastrophic losses, helping you overall and the manufacturers keep track of the issues with the drive. Windows OS does not come with any that I'm aware of built-in graphical parse utility, except for the fact that it tells you in when you go into defragmentation, if you try to defrag it, and the sector is bad, it will mark it back, but it will not be where it's self-monitoring, analysis, and reporting wise. It's not something in that matter. Any questions or doubts? RAID, as we said, RAID 1 was disk mirroring. It increases your fault tolerance if one of them fails. Obviously, you're going to need to replace it. As long as both drives that have the mirror image do not fail, you don't lose any of the data. RAID 5, that was the one that was disk striping with a parity bit. There you only lose an nth, not half of the data, but you lose an nth of the data to be able to facilitate the process. Still, you could only lose one drive, and basically, depending on the settings, I don't think they don't need to need 6, right? 6 they don't need. It's just 10 and 01. That's right. So RAID 10, you have, as we said, the mirrored with the striping set, and then the RAID 0 plus 1 is the striping and with the mirror. In this case, you do have a minimum of 4 drives compared to RAID 1. You need even set. In RAID 5, minimum of 3. In RAID 1, always you have to add in pairs. In RAID 5, you can add as you like. In RAID 10, you need to add 2 at a time, if I remember. It starts with 4 and add 2 after that in pairs. Questions? How many fault tolerance does RAID 1 plus 0 and 0 plus 1 have? As long as it's not the same exact drive, how much fault tolerance do we have? On RAID 10 and on
RAID 10.
0, RAID 10 and 0.1. Everyone agree? 1? Yes? 2. RAID 0 has 0, RAID 1 has 1, RAID 5 has 1, and RAID 10, as long as it's not the identical mirrored drive, you have up to 2 hard drive failures. Same thing with 0 plus 1. You have up to 2 hard drives technically that can die, as long as it's not the same, the one with, containing the exact same data. That is a maximum. Your optical drives and or Blu-rays, common problems usually with it is media related. The compact disc is usually reliable itself. Check obviously that the maintenance on the device is being done. Sometimes these things can get obviously, especially where depending where they're storing the actual unit, it can have a lot of dust in there in the housing itself, or it could be the CD itself is all scratched up. If the obviously if the operating system doesn't want to see the drive, that's something completely different than it not being able to read any of the CDs. You could obviously check and see if the connection of the power and or the connectors. You could check the BIOS itself to see if it is technically not disabled and or forcibly off within the BIOS, or it could be that if it is IDE, ensure that when it is IDE, the master slave is correctly placed onto the drives, because it could create a problem. Any questions or doubts?
No.
All right. As we stated in previous sessions, your no image on screen. Here's the answers for some of those things that you were reading earlier or that per perform troubleshooting. Obviously, and this one was pretty easy. Try another monitor itself, check the power. Hopefully, you did that first before trying another monitor. Remember that if function keys are available, make sure that it isn't disabled in the actual BIOS. Try maybe ensure if it is the port, maybe it's not your card, but maybe the port itself is the one that's bad. So if you're using the display port, try the HDMI port if you have that, or a VGA port to see if that allows you to connect to the actual monitor, or it could be actually the drivers themselves that create the issue. Obviously, if the monitor that keeps on shutting down, that can actually be internal. It could be overheating, or the actual power supply within the unit itself is going bad. If the problem persists after proper maintenance, then obviously you may want to replace the unit because unfortunately it is going bad. Questions or doubts? All right, your dead pixels or artifacts. Very much that it was either not fire at all, in other words, light up. You can check the settings in the backgrounds, but usually if that thing is burned and it doesn't want to go away, you can't do anything. It's not like the old tube ones where the colors used to go a little weird and you can put a strong magnet and massage the screen and somehow miraculously, I don't know how it did it, but it would fix it. When it comes to these dead pixels or artifacts, usually there is no other choice. You need to replace the monitor and or the screen if it is on a mobile device. When it comes to being laptops, usually they'll send you the whole screen. You remove the bezel, as we stated before, and just replace the actual internal screen. Incorrect correct colors. This can actually be most likely due to a monitor issue, or it could be because of users. I'm not trying to be funny. I had once where the user themselves were partly colorblind, or they had, I don't know what you call that, where they had certain colors and they messed with the settings on the actual I don't know if it was in Windows or on the actual thing, and it for them looked good, but for the other person that was coming at night, it was didn't look good, since one A wasn't look talking to B, and no one ever thought of somebody was going to be messing with these things. Make sure you verify the settings before you obviously switch out monitors and or do anything else. As for dim flickering images in LCD monitors, as we said, make sure if it's flickering too much, it could be the backlight is starting to fail. You might have to replace the backlight if and only if your company does that. Sometimes it's just pop an external monitor or buy yourself another laptop. If it is the case, could be also, as we said, refresh rate could be an issue, the reason why it is flickering. As for the dim image, that's mainly in reference to the backlight. As for distorted image, this could be more of a CRT monitors. Usually they start the motor itself where the magnetic the catheter root tube, catheter radiant tube monitors, those are the big ones. Usually the magnetic field within it is the one that started creating the problems. Now I remember it has a magnetic field in it. That's why, hence, when you put the magnet in, it reset the little magnet inside. That's too cute. Anyways, either which way, usually a lot of them had what they call a degausser and or some other device, like I said, to be able to also check. A lot of these people like to put other foreign objects that are creating this, either a strong magnet, a fan, or some other type of interference that's creating that onto the image. CRT tubes are famous for having any type of image, since problem, since it is created by a magnetic field, the actual image. Video issues, distorted geometry. It's obviously on the older CRT monitors. Those are the ones that were 4:3 aspect. They look like a square. The newer ones, which are 16:9, 16:10, usually the resolution of the actual monitor. If you don't do it to what it's expecting, it will look horrible. So if you try to mimic a 4 by 3 on a 16 by 10, it doesn't look right, and it gives you a distorted geometry kind of view. That's why usually they tell you to use the default resolution. And in this case, if it is that, just go and try to change the resolution. Maybe the user themselves went and unfortunately changed it for oversized images and icons. That can be due to the actual resolution. 800 by 600 with the normal icons that you have on the desktops will make everything look bigger. And the screen, in essence, is actually technically smaller because hardly nothing falls into it. So just verify, obviously, that it is not that. And in the case in Windows, you could actually make the icons bigger yourself, although the screen is as big as it can be, but you could actually make the icons much larger. Be aware, because especially these stations, when it comes to operations, a lot of users, since it is used by different users, have their own settings. In most of these cases, they are like these auto logon kiosks, and when it comes to those type of situations, obviously, since it is auto logging on, nobody's actually putting an ID and password. It's putting the exact same settings for everyone. Other graphic issues can be attributed to actual memory failure on the video card or on the motherboard, depending how the integrated actual video card or not. Problems could be the memory modules within the actual video card, and you might have to either replace the video card or add another video card on the actual unit if it's built on. Oops, I just jumped over something. Number one. Muhaba, help me out here.
A user is complaining that his screen has a lot of after image on his computer. What type of issue is this user reporting? I think it's ghosting.
Everyone agree? Ghosting?
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
A client complains that the laptop screen is not working when connected to an external monitor. He is able to still work on the external monitor. What the heck? He's able to work on the external monitor. The IT notices the laptop main screen only works when disconnected from VGA cable from the monitor, and the monitor shows no signal once disconnected from the cable. What's the best or the fastest solution based on the information we have? That's a trick question. I like that one.
Is the
Change the
projector setting?
I was gonna say that too.
You agree?
I'm surprised people got that one. I thought that would be a struggle.
Yeah. So definitely, those are the correct answers. The ghosting and projector. You'd be surprised how many people actually have an issue with that one where, why is it skipping? Stop skipping! Stay. Good boy. Okay. That one is a killer for a lot of people. I've seen plenty of people replace screens and or tell the user that that's the way they should use it. Because they can't figure out that it's might be just that it's set to projection mode, which means that it will stop it on the computer screen, and as soon as you remove it from the projector, then it'll turn it on the laptop screen. All right, different types of printers in different ways. So you have your impact printers, your inkjet printers, and your laser printers. Each one has its own plethora of situations. We're going to start now with your actual impact printers. Because the name says exactly what it is. It's physically impacting onto there. There's a motor, either be a daisy wheel or a dot matrix. You have a ribbon that's being worn out. You have uh, the actual um, track that pulls the paper that can create the problems too. So in reference to your low printing qualities, usually that's pretty simple. It could be either that when they change, because if they did just change the ribbon, it could be that when they changed the ribbon, they forgot to actually put back the lever so that the print head is close enough. Depending on how expensive these printers are, some of them automatically adjust themselves back, but usually the lower end ones require you to pull a lever and push a lever forward so that it can be close enough. In reference to the actual, if it is, as I said, it could be the actual ribbon that's worn, or it could be that even if it's a brand new ribbon and you checked everything, the ribbon can be not feeding. The ribbon must be able to continuously feed. So it could be, unfortunately, in worst case scenario, it could be the actual motor that pulls the tape through that's causing this problem, because it starts typing perfectly dark, but since the motor is not pulling the ribbon, it obviously gets worn out right away, the actual ribbon, because you're just typing on that one area. It could be that if it's not the motor, then maybe the actual ribbon itself is broken. Your printer jams inside this printer is basically common, especially because it is perforated with those little tracks. Apparently, the manufacturer can perforate holes, but they can't seem to get all the holes out of the holes. So the little circles are in there. The holes where they created the holes still are there. I don't know if that makes sense. So that one is very, very common. This amount of little holes when they get towards the nipples of the track on the side when it's feeding in, since it pushes that rubber thing, it actually takes the hole and punches it completely out. So that little circle with the if it's 5 ply, 3 ply, so at once every time that's 3 little circles, 5 little circles falling into the actual printer, and it actually does obstruct the actual feeding. You need to be very careful to obviously maintain that and make sure we come with either the air, actual compressed air, or an actual vacuum that's for printers to be able to clean that out. As for your step motor itself, a damaged step motor is very easy to detect. The damaged step motor will cause it to lose precision and moves farther and farther in each step. The alignment of the actual uh, letters or the space is not correct. Next printer. You're still here in your actual impact printers. You have your consistently fading that, as I said earlier, could be a worn printer, a ribbon, but it could be itself that the ribbon is not working. If it is not a ribbon from the manufacturer itself certified, sometimes they'll even say that they won't. But that's very, very few printers that do that. That's more in the actual inkjet printers where they come and play that little game. It prints lines that go from dark to light as the print head moves across the page. It's usually that the gear, as I said, that little gear that's supposed to be pulling it, he's not pulling it and advancing, because he's supposed to be pulling while he's going like that. He's supposed to be pulling that tape through. So most likely you're gonna have to actually replace the actual gear or mechanism itself. Once again, that's all depending on where you are in the given scenario. Sometimes you do, if they're the big ones, a lot of the times you just send them out and they replace them, or they send you the part to be able to replace that. As for a small black line running through and of it itself, the print head, the pin is stuck inside. Therefore, you need to unfortunately replace the whole thing. This is mostly for the ones, not the daisy wheels, but the ones that are the uh, regular impact dot matrix. Questions, doubts so far? As for the intermittent, it looks almost the same, but it looks like if he's playing Morse code, since these things are shaking and moving and doing this, it could be that the print cable is actually loose or shortened. Make sure that it's actually secured in the back, and usually they have a little special pins to make sure that it gets locked into place. As simple as this, you could actually just take it out and put it back in and put the little ears back on and see if that resolves the issue. Next area here we have is a small dark line running through it itself. I think we just did that, no? Yeah, we just did that. For the next one we have is actually, yeah, dark line running through itself. Print head is stuck. Yeah, out of print. Replace the push. Yeah. Next is the printer making printer noise but not printing. It appears on the page, but nothing's there. It looks like it goes all the way through. But it's blank. Just like in a laser printer, ink's gone. In this case, unfortunately, the ribbon has completely been depleted from it going back and forth because it does rewind itself. It goes back and forth. It's no longer able to make characters. Printer printing garbage such as garbled characters. Obviously, make sure the actual cable is correctly installed and or the drivers. And lastly, it could be the actual printer control board or the PCB that's actually gone bad. Inkjet printers. Your inkjet printers obviously are the ones that a lot of people have nowadays at home. The main things is the actual print head cartridges, the belt, the step motors, or the paper feeding mechanism, or it could be the actual control interface itself. As for print quality, the majority of the inkjet printers problems are obviously in quality. Most of it could be because of, believe it or not, a non-manufacturer cartridge. A lot of them will not service their printers if you do not buy a Canon cartridge, because of the fact that these off-market shelf ones are very, very, very horrible quality, and it creates problems. An example of a quality problem is that you have thin or blank lines in every line of the text. It could be that the nozzle itself is actually being, I say, clogged up. You can sometimes clean these things with a little bit of alcohol, but I assure you, first thing you check if it is not. These things are very picky. If it's not their cartridge, I have yet to see any of them not give you problems like that. I didn't believe it at first, but after like the fifth one that I ran into of users doing the exact same thing, buying aftermarkets, I was able to convince, obviously, procurement to change their mind and go back to the actual market ones. As for color output problems, it could be one, the user. Two, it could be the actual cartridges themselves, and or it could that it needs some type of self-cleaning utility. Questions or doubts? Remember, users can be a problem. So if it's printing only in black and white, everything in black and white, brand new cartridge, only print. Hello, they did something to it, right? Most likely they set it to only print to black and white. You could actually force your printer to only print in black and white. Next one, paper jams. Inkjet printers usually have problems to this. Any little thing, as I said, it could be the pickup roller. It could be the wrong type of paper. You've got to be kidding me how many people have actually bought the wrong type of paper for these things. The gauge and or the type of paper will cause this problem, or paper clips, staples. I don't understand it because it's a printer. How did a paper clip get in there? But they'll just throw anything in there. I'm pretty sure I've even seen, dare I say, crumbs of chicken. Might have been KFC. Paper feed problems normally just make sure that there's nothing there obstructing it. You could obviously verify that the actual pads themselves are not stuck, or if it is that the mechanism is actually the picker rollers are moving. Another thing is sometimes if they overfeed it with paper, and that will actually cause problems. The next area we have here is the step molding problems. Just like impact printers, if the step motor is failing, you'll have the exact same results. The spaces between the lines are not right, to the point when it gets real bad, it just starts typing on top of it. So it's one big line, black line of a whole bunch of characters. Next, your laser printers. This is the process, obviously, that we learned for the steps of a laser printer. You have your processing, your charging, exposing, developing, transferring, fusing, cleaning. As for processing, the page to be printed gets rendered. So if it's getting rendered, the image getting rendered, that has to do with memory. When it's the charging, that's the actual charging corona where it gets the actual high voltage from the HVPS that it has inside, right? And it uniformly it puts the charge onto the photosensitive drum. So if it's not charging, the only thing giving it power is the high voltage power supply and the charging corona, right? Because the HVPS gives it the corona. But a good thing about most of these things, usually it's all one contained unit. The cartridge itself contains the majority of these things, and then the fusing kit in the back has all of the fusing parts. But for the case of the actual exam, you need to understand the actual processes, because the very expensive ones will have the actual toner and the fusing components separate. Your exposing is the actual laser exposed, just like you expose it in the dark room, in the little red room. But when you're doing exposures, that's what's happening. It's getting exposed. It charges and reduces it down to 100, negative 100. The pattern is formed on a drum and your image is there. Now you're going to develop. And here is where the roller acquires a negative charge from actual HVPS, right? It picks up the toner, which gets the same negative charge as the developing toner, as we saw when it goes through those two rollers, and the lesser one gets attracted to the paper. All the toner then jumps into the paper. Next is the actual transferring, where the corona wire roller acquires a strong positive and just poof, throws it onto there. Next, now that the actual jumping from one location to the other, it then fuses it on with the heat. So, and if the charging corona wire goes bad, there's no way I can actually create the charges correctly, right? The same thing when I'm fusing here. When I'm fusing, if the fuser gone bad, the ink won't stay on the paper. It will start smudging. And to the point that sometimes when it's starting to go bad, not when it's completely bad, you'll see that it looks like a hazed picture, like I don't know how to explain. I think we had an example on one of those pictures where everything's printing, but there's like this hazed back gray weird thing, and that's because of the fact that the dust is still loose when it's getting through there, and obviously it's not melting and adhering to the paper, it's actually adhering to the roller inside. You're going to see some orange rollers which start accumulating the toner onto them. Lastly is the cleaning, and that's the actual rubber blade that cleans the actual drum inside where the fluorescent lamp is for the actual toner, and it erases the actual image off of the drum. For laser printers themselves, the troubleshooting is the power, just to ensure that obviously is turned on. You can check with a multimeter to ensure that you're having the negative, a +5 and the +24. Usually you're not touching a lot of these printers in there. As I said, this is depending on the given scenario and where you are. But if you are a person that's going to be repairing printers, you can check with a multimeter the actual voltages. No connectivities in reference to IP issues. That's in reference, obviously, could be the actual, if it is inside the printer, it can be the print server that's gone bad and or the network card. Check the cables on the physical nature, and at the same time make sure that it didn't get deconfigured. If something has a brand new IP or something like that, it could create problems for the user. Nothing prints. Obviously, are you the only one affected is the first thing we need to ensure. Also, we might want to try to print directly from the actual print queue instead of from the application. Ensure that it is turned on and or restarted. And lastly, that beautiful online button that everyone loves to touch can be obviously touched, and it's offline, therefore it won't print anything. Next area is your paper jams. Laser printers usually have problems with either worn rollers or broken drive gears itself. If it has problem with the rollers, usually they send you the actual kits. If it is the actual drive gears inside, some of them are easy to replace depending if it is on the exit area for towards the back, but some of them cannot be replaced and or by you. They might have to be either service replaced or by a brand new printer. Usually though, the ones that are usual worn wear and tear, a lot of them you can just go in and pop them out and put in the new ones. Instructions usually come, everyone has a different way of doing it, obviously. Blank pages themselves, check the toner cartridge, obviously, maybe shake it around, ensure that it does have toner. As for the only other issues that could create that we stated before was the transfer corona assemblage could actually be damaged, creating obviously an actual blank page. And as we stated, to be able to create these voltages, we require the HVPS, the high voltage power supply. Without this, we've got nothing. Therefore, if it's unable to power this puppy and give the create low and high voltage, it will unable to be able to print, and it will all be blank. All black pages. This is happening when the actual charging unit, in other words, the corona wire or the charging corona roller in the toner cartridge malfunction and fails. Obviously, then the because the drum is grounded, it has no charge, and anything that the toner itself tries to do, it doesn't stick to anything because it has no charge. It's at zero. As the drum rotates, all the transfer is the black page is formed because there's no variance anywhere inside this drum. It's all one uniform charge, which is nothing. Repetitive small marks or defects. This could be caused by the spilled toner actually inside. You'll be surprised, especially when the people go and take out the tape, or if it is the actual bucket that they're refilling the toner, where they unfortunately do this on top of the printer, and or if it is a cheap aftermarket toner cartridge, where it actually starts leaking toner inside and it creates this. Next is the vertical black lines on the page. This could be caused by a damaged drum itself or the actual dirty charging corona. The drum is typically a part of the actual toner cartridge, 99% of the chance. So it's as simple as just going ahead and just replacing the actual cartridge. Imaging or smudging, the fuser isn't reacting to the proper temperature, which obviously does not allow for the ink to stay where it's supposed to be. So it creates that smudge appearance. Ghosting, it's what you have when you see a faint image of the previous page, not my page, but the previous page. This is obviously caused by one or two things. Either the actual cleaning blade is unable to actually clean it, or the actual lamps are not able to finish the job. Either or, a lot of the times, this is all in one housing. You could just replace the cartridge and you're good to go. Printer's garbage, that obviously must be 99% chance something happened to the driver. Maybe the OS was upgraded and created this conflict. Just double check that before you believe that there's anything wrong with the formatter board on that printer. Another thing that you got to be careful is if the printer does not have the font, it will not print that font. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of that. Were you aware of that?
I wasn't.
No.
I wasn't.
Check your laser printers. Not all laser printers are made to do all types of fonts. So therefore, if the user all of a sudden gets this weird new font that does not exist in its little driver library of fonts, it's not going to understand the words coming out of its mouth. Alrighty then. So every time I print something, my laser printer and touch it, it smudge. What do that?
The fuser isn't working correctly.
Everyone agree? The fuser?
I agree.
Yes.
Definitely. It is the fuser. If it starts to smudge in any which way, the only one that does that job is the fuser. He's the one that makes sure that ironing board in the back over 300 degrees, please don't touch it unless if you feel like melting butter out of your hands. I wouldn't touch that. Make sure that you turn it off and leave it off for a while before attempting to replace a fuser. I would never, ever, 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 ever. It's just like trying to open up a radiator of a hot car. It's just not a good idea. It tends to not work out. Next, the whole purpose of using network is to connect to resources. As we know, if you have no connectivity, the most common issue that prevents it could be a bad cable. Could be obviously also that I've seen it plenty of times with cleaning crews where they start moving these monsters around, and unfortunately they're trying to clean behind the actual all-in-ones, and they actually disconnect it from the actual wall. In some cases, it can be as simple as just replacing it, and in worst cases, it could be that they actually damage the actual faceplate, hopefully before they damage the actual NIC card. And in most cases, it could be just as simple as just turn them off and on again, and it will actually be resolved. Either which way, we always start from the actual physical layer, ensure either that the units connected correctly or that the switch access point, whatever it is that is trying to connect to, is actually on. For network issues or no connectivities, if you don't have lights, once again, we check first the physical nature. Is it connected? Is it plugged in? If I don't have any lights on it, then it can be that the cable has gone bad. Just check the walls for rats. Usually that helps out. It might require you to actually do a brand new drop, believe it or not. Or it could be maybe that the little head on the back of it is broken and it's coming loose. One of the easy ways that you can check within the actual computer, within the OS of Windows, is by typing the actual word ipconfig. It will give you the actual current settings of your network cards. Inside Linux, it is ifconfig for your physical card and iwconfig for your wireless card. configurations. Similar thing, somebody's bored, they're just trying to make you learn new words. Any questions? Continuation of no connectivity. In here we have the common is to refrain from users. They are having network issues is, oh, sorry, phrase, not refrain. Common phrase I take it from users is, I can't get anything. This doesn't tell us anything. We need to make sure we isolate exactly what is it and maybe ask some more open-ended questions than just the simple I can't get into anything. What is anything? What are you trying to get into? Is it your email? Is it the server here? Is it a FTP site? What exactly is your problem? It could be maybe that they, as simple as it is, could be that they, if it is a wireless thing, they could have disconnected from the wireless or turned off the wireless. We need to ensure exactly what is the resource that they're trying to get to and identify the resource, because it may not just be them, it could be the actual resource that they're trying to get to. So to be able to determine these two things, we can always ping our loopback address, then proceed to ping maybe a router and then or the printer itself, whatever it is you're trying to get to in the LAN, before we try to ping anything outside the actual network. And how do we do this, Diego? Well, we can ping to the local host, as I said, which is your 172, no, well, sorry, 127. Just like, yeah, always mess with me. 127.0.0.1, and you could actually ping the actual default gateway if you know by going to ipconfig. You'll have your default gateway, and you can ping him. Now that you've gotten to the second part of the network, now you can proceed to maybe pinging a known website, and lastly, pinging maybe the location you're trying to get to. Questions are done. Next one. In reference to your IP config, you have the following switches. Inside IP config all gives you all information, everything, detailed as possible. IP config release does exactly that. If you have DHCP settings, it's going to release the DHCP settings to any of those cards. Anything that's manual, that's ridiculous. It's manual, so there's no way it's going to release. The same thing here, you have release 6 for the actual IP version 6, renew to your DHCP server, or renew 6 to actually renew a IP from version 6. Lastly is, and very helpful, especially if you're having problems with something that might have just changed IP addresses. One of the things that you can do is flush the domain name services, since it is already cached either on your PC or on whatever DNS server that you obtain this information. Flushing your DNS will force the entry to get re-evaluated and hopefully bring the actual updated information to your PC. Any questions and doubts? Trace route or trace RT. This puppy is very useful to finding exactly where did Humpty Dumpty fall off this wall. What's he gonna do is he's gonna actually ping up to 30 hops. A hop is every node. Every node is every router that he is trying to get to. Therefore, in this case, when he does a trace route, he will ping with the command ping in the background with a time to live of 1, a time to live of 2, a time to live of 3. That's how this command actually works. It's nothing out of the extraordinary. All it does is that, and eventually, when it's able to get to the actual source itself, it stops counting the hops. That's all it's doing. At the same time, it's diagnosing every single hop. He doesn't know what IP is this. Since he knows what's the place that he wants to get to, and he put a time to live of 1, does anyone know what a time to live is?
The amount of hops it take before it stops.
That is correct. You guys have to be fully aware of time to live when it comes to networking, because some actual applications can actually adjust their time to live. So if the time to live is too short and there's latency issues, it can create problems. All right. So what he's doing is that. So since he's pinging the last IP, that Miami guy, all the way down there, and he did a time to live of 1, as soon as the first person answered, that's it. The packet's time to live has died. That router is not allowed to pass that packet any further. That's how he does it. That's how they make sure that things don't just aimlessly just keep on routing through the internet, and if it never reaches somewhere, it would imagine it'll just bog down the internet, because it's just going to be bouncing everywhere trying to look for its route. Now, why do I want to do this? Because if you notice, on my 7th hop here, I'm having issues with latency, and I'm able to determine with ease that there I'm having issues. If this was at the telco, it looks like it is from the points of it. It's Comcast, and it's them that's creating the issue. Now I can call it out to them and tell them, look, after I get to the Miami backbone on this IP, right after that, my next route, in that route and next route, I'm having major latency issues. This is usually we're talking about for network issues. Next one, NetStat. This puppy does exactly that. It gives you a status of all your ports and connections that you have at the moment. If you have them open and or established, or if they're listening and waiting. If you'll notice, here is all the IPs of the local address. His MF, I can never say that word. The E guy, MFerial ports and non-inferior ports. Inferior, non-inferior ports. Non-inferior ports and inferior ports, I think it is. I can never remember which one it is. But you get me. Any of those ports here are mine, and then these ports over here are the ones that I'm connecting to, and this current state. What this identifies is just in case if you see that there is a foreign IP that you shouldn't be connecting to, then you could see that obviously that may be the problem that you're having if you're having a lot of issues with latency and or obviously unknown connections. Your net commands. This baby is useful, especially net use. That's usually to create an actual map drive. You have your net accounts to be able to set the actual options. This is all done from the black DOS screen. Please feel free to play with it in your virtual machines that hopefully you have created already. You have net config also. You have net computer to be able to add or delete computer accounts. Net file to close open files. You have a plethora of different things here. The one that you do interact with a lot would be net print. I did a little bit of net send, but not too much because they took that away, which is just basically sending them a message. You also have net use that gets used a lot to be able to connect to drives, remote drives. Questions, doubts? NS lookup. NS lookup is the command to be able to look up a name. So name service lookup, if I remember correctly, or at least that's the way I remember name server lookup. Command allows you to be able to look up either the IP to the name or the FQDN to the IP. Whichever it is, depending which you give it first. that server will answer. And if he isn't qualified to answer, he will tell you who answered for him. Questions or doubts? This would obviously help you if you do not know the IP of something, or if you want to verify that your DNS server is actually working. If you do not have any questions or concerns, it's pretty much up to where we go, I believe, in this presentation. I open it up to you guys now for your questions before I stop the recording. All right.